Coming to you live from Fayetteville, Arkansas in the beautiful Appleby Business Center studios. It's time for Northwest Arkansas Business Radio with Adam Robison. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Whatever time of the day you are listening, this is Northwest Arkansas Business Radio, and I am your host, Adam Robison. And folks, you are in for a treat today. I don't know about you, but I love telling fishing stories. I love talking about fish that I caught, or even better, fish that I almost caught, that one that got away. Today, we have an actual fishing guide by the name of Joe Farkus. Joe runs Joe's Striper Guide Service up on Beaver Lake. And Joe, welcome to Northwest Arkansas Business Radio. Go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners and just provide some background on your experience in the fishing industry.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, Joe with Joe's Striper Guide Service. Moved here in 1979 and had a real job until 1990, when I decided I wanted to go do what I love to do, which is catching striped bass on Beaver Lake.
That's great.
And, now we're into our 32nd year and still loving every day of it.
That's so great. What inspired you to become a fishing guide? Not just get out there and fish yourself, but teach others and show others how to do it well.
It's always been a love of mine, even growing up as a kid. I started off under a bobber and worm for bluegill, and after having moved to Arkansas and discovering these huge striped bass, I got hooked on fishing for those, and honestly, the lake just kept calling. I wanted to make it, since it was my passion, I wanted to make it my living.
That sounds incredible. Now, I had the privilege of taking a guided fishing trip with you back in December, caught the biggest fish of my life. That's one of the reasons why we did. And so tell me, and for the listeners out there that might be thinking this is a fun idea for themselves, what type of fishing trips do you offer, and then what locations or bodies of water do you specialize in?
Well, we offer a half-day trip, which is a 5-hour excursion, or a full-day trip, which is an 8-hour excursion, and that's really dictated basically on the time of year that you decide to go. We have a year-round fishery on Beaver Lake, and so at that time, when you decide how many days or half days you do want to fish, we'll look at what length of time you want to stay out and how much you can afford to spend, and then it will be focusing on trophy stripers on Beaver Lake.
Okay. Now, I've waded 4 questions into this interview. I've got to hear a fishing story. Like, you were telling me about this monster that you caught here a while back. Can you describe what you caught, what the experience was like, or just share a fishing story, because I love to hear them.
Well, just this last April, I had a very good client and his wife. We're on board, and in March and April, I worked very hard at catching my own gizzard shad, which in that time of year, you need to use the biggest baits you can get. The females come in and are looking to spawn, though they don't find what they're looking for. They're in shallow, and we're running planer boards in on the bank. And we fished for probably 4 hours, and it's that time of year that you may not have a tremendous amount of action, but all of a sudden the rod doubled over, and he set the hook, handed her the rod, and 20 minutes later we had a 47.5-pound fish in the boat.
47.5 pounds.
It was her first striper, their first trip to the lake. Never could figure out. I mean, how lucky can you get?
That's so incredible.
Yeah. How
long would a 47.5-pound striper be? Just guess.
Yeah. Well, the water was a little chilly. The fish was a little sluggish. That fight probably took 10 to 15 minutes, but they can last longer depending on water temp.
Okay.
On a fish that size, or a 30-pound class fish, which is 30 is kind of the standard that everyone's looking to mount as a trophy striper. So
okay, well I know
that was a fantastic fish this spring, and just she did great handling the rod. Didn't need a lot of coaching on my part even though she hadn't caught a striper before, and it all went great.
Awesome. I know when I was with you, I brought in a 17 and a half pounder. Wish that I would have mounted that fish just simply because right now I keep the picture right next to my bed, and it's just me holding that fish.
We're going to get you a bigger one.
I can't wait. I've got it. We're scheduled for December. I can't wait, and I'm excited about it. Now, Joe, tell me, there are a lot of fishing services out there. What sets you apart from anybody else?
Well, number one, it is my passion, and actually, I hate to say this, but I know my job description. You know, I work real hard at catching people fish, but the main thing in hiring a guide is not to put yourself on board with somebody you don't feel comfortable being out with all day.
Okay.
We have a good time. We're going to share stories. I'm going to help you if you're looking for information on how to catch these fish. I'm going to get up and move the boat after 2 hours if there's not a bite, unless I know they're in the area. And with the 32 years of experience I've got, I'm pretty much know where they're going to be at certain times of the year.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna do all we can to catch you fish, and you're gonna also be fishing out of one of the finest rigs there is on the lake.
Wow, great. Now I'm sure fishing is no different from anything else. There are various trends and techniques that come and go. I remember as a child watching fishing shows with my dad, and it seemed like there was just a never-ending amount of information to pass on. How do you stay up to date with these trends and techniques in fishing?
Well, not only do you find a lot on fishing shows off the internet or television, but I work 2 or 3 different sports shows a year. Now with COVID, we were off for a while, but I go out and I mingle amongst a lot of the tackle suppliers, other fishermen. That's really where you're going to get your information from, and learning anything about fishing and keeping up to date on what's going on. The electronics and so forth is a never-ending process, but I'm pretty old school and stick with the pretty much a standard sonar, side finder, so forth, and you know, so we've got the tools necessary on board to catch them.
All right, great. So talk to me about the process a typical client would go through to book your services. My wife booked the trip for me, so I don't even know the answer to this question.
Oh, you got a good woman.
I got a great woman, let me tell you. And she was the one who said, hey, book it again because we had such a good time the first time. Describe the process a typical client goes through when they book you.
Well, for so many of them these days, I'm found, not only on the internet, but like I said, through mouth-to-mouth referrals. And then once a person calls me and we discuss when they want to go and establish a date, I operate from a deposit that holds that date. I instruct them on where they can stay that's convenient for both of us, depending on also what they're looking for, and coordinate the trip from there.
Okay, good. So sounds like there's some customizable options there. You work with people as need to.
Sure.
That's great.
Some like cabins, some like hotels. There's not many of those really around the lake, but we'll get you set up to where it's as convenient as it can be for everyone. And then, and some folks are staying here for the week or whatever on vacation. Don't be afraid to give us a short notice call.
Okay.
And I'll give you an honest report too. If they're really not biting well, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I would rather see you come back in a period where they could be doing better. But if they are on and I've got an opening, we're on.
Yeah.
We're going.
Well, I remember the call that we had. Our original date was set for November, and you actually said, "Hey, I've been out on the lake for a couple of weeks. They're just not biting. I think you'd be better off if you looked at the second week or first week of December, I think it was." And we had a wonderful day. And so I appreciate that advice because obviously, if somebody's paying their hard-earned money, to me, it's an investment to connect with a fishing guide that's got some integrity.
Well, while you're on that subject, I think it may have been a weather-related issue too. And if we see it's just going to be brutal, hey, that's no fun for anyone.
Yeah.
I kind of have a 40-degree rule. If it's 40 and sunny and no wind, it's beautiful out there. Dress for it, But if it's going to be thunderstorms pounding down and whatnot, or just brutal cold wind, we need to plan it for another time, and we will. That's me. I'm looking out for the best for you, trying to do the best job we can of catching you some fish.
Well, that's incredible. I remember the 40-degree rule because you had mentioned it was actually 37 the day we went out, and you had mentioned the 40-degree rule. The wind was blowing, and for the first 10 minutes, I thought, I am going to die out here. It was so cold. And then all of a sudden, you pulled behind this hill, or it wasn't a mountain, but it was a hill.
Bluff, yeah.
And the wind was dead.
Yep.
It was nice and warm. You took care of us. It was good stuff. And so I would say anybody listening, don't be afraid of a little bit of wind, because Joe's got some tips and tricks to keep you nice and toasty when you're out there. If not toasty, at least not hypothermic, right?
We don't have heated seats.
Yeah, we might ought to rephrase that just a little bit. So, Joe, when you get someone who comes onto your boat, what kind of gear should they bring? Do they need to bring their tackle box, all their poles? Do you take care of them? What's that answer?
Well, it's funny. Some folks will show up prepared because they've done this before, but if they haven't, they can be very unprepared. I assume sometimes, and I shouldn't, that they've checked the weather and should dress accordingly for it. But that's the case. A shower is one thing. With some rain gear. If it's going to rain all day, that's no fun. And so you want to be prepared for whatever Mother Nature's going to dish out. And then I'll furnish everything for the trip.
Okay.
All the bait, tackle, rods and reels and everything. There's no hidden costs in my fees, and in some cases with some other guide services there are. So that's a good question to find out from anybody you talk to about hiring for fishing. You need to be prepared and know what you need, and as well as the guide knowing what he needs, where he needs to be, and so forth. So
okay, great. Now, in complete transparency, I'm definitely not the outdoorsman of my family. My brother is that guy. But so I showed up on your boat, and I was thinking, I've caught a couple of perch in my life. I'd never looked at stripers. I'd never caught anything like I did that morning with you. How do you assess the skill level of these fishermen and fisherwomen on your boat? And then how do you really kind of gauge the preference of what kind of experience your clients are wanting?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I don't always remember to ask if they fished before, but I have had clients who really have never caught anything, and on into the guys who have fished the world over. And you just have to find out how much experience they've had by asking. And then secondly, have they striper fished? And even if it's been somewhere else where the experience is completely different, maybe the size average is a lot smaller, like down on Lake Texoma, that fishery is completely different than beaver. And so when you come out with us, I'm pretty clear about what we need to do and how you need to handle the rod. I'll walk through all that with everyone as we're getting set up. And then the big thing is, can they play one of these big fish? Because you just can't crank them in.
Right.
You need to learn how to handle that rod and play the fish. And I'll work with you, be as patient as I possibly can.
Yes.
And some certainly get you to where you've been through it maybe one time or two, and then you'll have it down.
Yeah. Now there's a little inside joke there in what Joe just shared, as far as sometimes people get a little tense on the water. My brother had come with us that morning, and if you've met my brother, he's a little more hot-headed than I am. He's getting better at it, but he's a little more hot-headed, and Joe was even able to manage that bit of a situation.
Well, I was a little tense that morning myself, and a little pushy, somewhat I felt on the instruction. And your brother very kindly pointed that out.
Well.
And at which point, I needed to slow down. I realized it at that point and took a step back.
Yeah.
And then began to work with him more so on how to catch the fish, because some guides are so intense they ruin the experience. And I learned that years ago, and I got to remind myself of it every now and then. I took a friend of mine fishing before I started guiding. here on Beaver Lake, and I've known, actually it was my boss.
Oh.
And I've known him for years, and when we got back to the plant on Monday, he basically pointed out he didn't have a good time. It was because I was too intense. I mean, I didn't have this right, that right, you name it. Everything had to be here, there, whatever. He said he felt like he couldn't move. And so I learned a lesson from that, and that's part of being a guide.
Yeah.
You're a teacher.
Yeah.
You're not just someone who's going to go out and try to hook these fish. So,
and I think that definitely speaks to the experience we had as a whole, in that you would watch, see where we were proficient, and let us do it ourselves. But when we needed help, you were right there to give help.
Exactly.
So, excellent. So, how do you approach sustainable fishing practices and ensure the conservation of fish populations at Beaver Lake? Do you practice catch and release? Is there something else there?
Well, on our end, yes, I do have posted on the site that I do catch and release. However, the limit is 3 fish per person, and they have to be 20 inches. I don't really want to carve a trophy fish. I don't want to. I'm not going to carve anything illegal, but I don't have a problem keeping a mess of fish for folks. Do we need a dozen 15-pound fish? For 4 guys, I don't think so.
Right.
We really have room for 6 to 8 decent, and I'd rather clean an average 12 to 15 pounder than I would actually a 20-inch fish.
Okay.
Those are our yearlings and what people are coming for. And I don't want to go into a long, lengthy thing, but with COVID, we didn't get stocked the first year, and the second year they lost a batch of fish that they bought from South Carolina through the summer. We rely totally on stockings here.
Wow.
And though you think, well, they don't reproduce, that's not going to matter whether I take this fish or not. We want to catch good quality fish, and I've seen it, of course, cycle all through the years, and sometimes you're on an upswing or a downswing on your size averages. So I just try to work it out with everybody, and I got guys who don't want to keep anything. I got groups that want to keep everything. It's so I just feel my way through that with each of them.
Okay, now something you said in the middle of that answer that got my attention. You said I don't mind carving average fish that were 12 to 15 pounds. That's an average striper, 12 to 15 pounds?
Our average was 12 to 13. I don't know what we're running now. To be honest with you, the last couple of years with COVID and all, I haven't been as in touch with what's happened with the game and fish. I know there's been surveys. I know there were fish tagged. I've heard results from all those. But this is the time of year right now, actually the first 2 weeks of June, that they're supposed to bring them from the hatcheries, or they had for years. And so that's on my list of things to follow up on this year, is to get a little more back involved in our stocking. And I think we need as many fish, of course, as we can get. There's more pressure now. There's more guides. And there's a lot of good local fishermen, too. So
okay. Tell me, how do you handle situations when clients book a trip, you've been out there, and you're just not having success? What do you do then?
Well, my job there, again, is to educate them.
Okay.
We never know the exact answer. Fishing, we all think that, well, because of this weather change, or because of that, or because of this lunar cycle, or the magic crystal ball isn't working, and they're lockjawed, as I've seen. Or in our case on Beaver, they can disappear into our timber and we don't even see them. And when that's going on, the customers are sitting there going, well, maybe he doesn't even know where the fish are. And I understand that. So it's a matter of them knowing I've worked hard to catch them fish. I've got the bait, the tackle, the rods, everything ready to roll. And it's in good shape. a comfortable seat, and then it's up to the fish from there. And if it's not happening, I can only speculate myself. One of the worst situations is sometimes is be on the back side of a front. When that cold air rolls in out of the northwest after we've had a rain or not, and so forth, and that pressure changes back the other direction, you can have a bite certain times of the year, and other times of the year you don't. So it's fishing for me as well as it is anybody else when they go.
Yeah, and that was something I didn't anticipate. I remember the morning we went out, it took over an hour for us to even get our first bite.
Oh,
and
sure.
I remember you talking to the water and saying, now, come on, we know you're here. and then, you mentioned, hey, this isn't a guarantee. It's fishing for me, too. And I began to think, I started having some poo-poo thoughts and was like, well, gosh, pay enough for this trip. I want to catch a fish.
Right.
But you were absolutely right. I couldn't be frustrated with you because you don't make the fish jump in the boat.
Right.
You just take us to where they've been before. But then after that hour, boy, they just consistently started hitting for us.
I was so glad to, because I thought you were going to kill me at one point.
No, I think we may have had to throw my brother off the boat.
No, he was going to throw me in.
Oh, maybe that was
I think he was going to throw me in.
Tell me, we're just about finished. You've been so generous with your time today. Thank you so much for that. Are there any specific regulations or licensing requirements that clients need to be aware of before booking you in?
Just an Arkansas regular fishing permit. If you're a resident and non-resident, is $16 for 3 days. That's the cheapest and smallest one you can buy. I do think they sell a 2-week permit too, but anyhow, that's necessary. And then of course I have to be licensed properly too. So
okay, great. Last question. What advice or tips do you give someone who's either new to fishing or they're considering booking a trip with your fishing service?
Well, the main thing is, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I used to hand out an article at the boat show on how to hire a guide. And the main thing is, once you've looked at his credentials, look at maybe his equipment, how long not necessarily how long he's been in the business, but all those obvious factors, how he'll be fishing, and what with, and so forth, is do you feel comfortable being out in the boat with this person for 5 hours or 8 hours or several days? I hear so many people that have caught good fish here come back to me at the sports show and say, I went with so-and-so, and, we won't ever go with him again because of this reason or that they didn't have a good experience.
Yeah.
And that's the main thing.
Yeah.
And the kids is an issue, too. I've got grandkids. I love to see them catch them. We need to be real patient and work with them and so forth. And some guys have it and some don't, as there is in any business, So I came from a people background in the glass industry before I went into full-time guiding, and I've always enjoyed meeting everyone and have a great time, and I'm sure grateful for everyone who's fished with me.
Absolutely. So, I know that I'm going again this December. My son, who didn't go last time, has been staring at my picture all spring or winter, and he's like, I'm going next time. I'm going next time.
Oh,
so
great.
He can't wait to go. He'll be 14 at the time of the trip.
Oh, man,
yeah.
He's ready.
Yeah, he's ready to go. And I didn't know what to expect when I booked the trip. So
you pick the day then, and you make sure they're biting for me, would you?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be important. It's going to be important. Well, Joe, tell people how they can find out more about Joe's Striper Guide service. You have a website you want to share?
I do. I'm at www.joestriperguide.com.
Okay.
I'll be honest with you. I have a Facebook page, but I don't get on Facebook. I'm too old school, too old-fashioned. I like meeting people, shaking hands at sports shows. Most of my business, probably 80% of it, comes from out of state. And so, yeah, you can reach me there, or you can reach me on the phone at 479-640-2386.
All right. Well, there you go. On behalf of Joe Farkus and Joe's Striper Guide Service, we just want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of Northwest Arkansas Business Radio right here on Business RadioX. We can't wait to talk to you again